In this accident, most of the survivors were seated in the rear of the plane. Most of those who died up front. Those sections, along with some valuable clues, are now at the bottom of the sea. The one section that didn't sink is towed to the port in Palermo and taken to a nearby hangar. A team of agents from Italy's National Flight Safety Agency, the ANSV, begin looking for leads. Their job: find out why Flight 1153's engines stopped in mid-flight.
We need to collect as much as evidence as possible in order to fulfill two main answers. What happened and why had it happened?
They are led by Chief ANSV investigator Vincenzo Panetta.
I arrived in Palermo the day after the accident, on the 7th, very early in the morning.
Per piacere, permesso.
A flight test engineer by training, Panetta has led several air crash investigations. The engines and central fuselage of Tuninter Flight 1153 have been recovered. The rest of the plane lies somewhere off the Sicilian coast.
The main challenge of the investigation was the fact that the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder and also the front fuselage were 1,500 meters under the sea.
While the Italian Navy conducts a deep-water search for the rest of the wreck and the crucial black boxes, Italian investigators are given some assistance by the plane's European manufacturer. ATR's Giuseppe Caldarelli is here to find out if there's a flaw with the company's plane.
Anytime there is an accident, and also one people die, for me is a big accident.
Worldwide, hundreds of ATR-72s cross the skies each day.
Those aircraft have a very sound structure and robust systems and are very cost efficient.
Together, Panetta and Caldarelli set out to find why both engines on such an advanced airplane died in mid-flight.
TUI 1153, we have lost both engines.
Before it happens again.
Captain Garvey, how are you?
I'm getting better, thank you.
Investigators want to know what happened in the cockpit of Tuninter Flight 1153 when the engines died. Without the cockpit voice recorder, they must rely on the recollections of surviving passengers and crew members.
The main cause of double engine failure could be a lack of fuel.
But according to Captain Shafiq Garbi, lack of fuel was not the problem.
What were your fuel readings?
The fuel quantity indicator said 1,800 kilograms of fuel.
What is your fuel load?
Cockpit fuel quantity 1,800 kilograms.
Fuel supply, check.
Was there any warning that you were low on fuel?
There was definitely no low fuel warning. Just a low feed pressure light.
The absence of a low fuel warning and the presence of a low feed pressure warning is a major clue.
This set of alarms usually indicates that there is a problem in feeding the engine with fuel.
Since the plane's gauges indicated that there was fuel on board that did not get to the engines, ATR's Giuseppe Caldarelli looks for flaws in the fallen plane's fuel delivery system. Four years earlier, an Airbus operated by Air Transat developed a leak in the fuel line that feeds the plane's right engine. Over time, the plane leaked all of its fuel and both engines failed. The pilots were forced to glide their plane to an emergency landing. That incident has a lot of similarities to the Tuninter crash. Giuseppe Caldarelli's team looks for breaks or blockages in the fuel lines and evidence that the fuel pumps malfunctioned and stopped fuel flow to the engines. While Caldarelli waits for technicians to complete tests on pumps and lines, Panetta decides to start a new line of inquiry. He explores the possibility that the fuel that was on board was somehow contaminated.
Fuel contamination can derive from 4 or 5 different sources.
Kerosene-based jet fuel is very delicate. If stored or transferred improperly, it can be polluted with water, sand or fungus, even sticky residue from the hoses of refueling tankers. Any of these could prevent the fuel from properly igniting and could have caused the engines to shut down.
How much fuel are you adding?
400 kilograms.
The plane last took on fuel in Bari. Samples from the tanker that supplied it are taken for testing. Panetta needs to prove that one of these contaminants got into Flight 1153's fuel, prevented combustion and caused both engines to fail.
Sediments can be transferred from the tanker truck to the aircraft. So the fuel filter can be clogged and so the engine can have some problem.
Technicians remove the truck's fuel filters to look for evidence of contamination. Hoses and couplings are swabbed for sticky residue or colonies of microorganisms and submitted for testing at an Italian Air Force laboratory. The fuel is filtered for minute particles suspended in the fluid. And carefully examined for impurities. The truck's filters are also inspected for residue or sediment from the tanks. Meanwhile, in Palermo, Caldarelli and his technicians have completed tests on Flight 1153's fuel lines and pumps. The tests are thorough, the results conclusive.
The fuel feed line were okay, were no leak.
If the fuel delivery system was working, and the two pilots remember having ample fuel, then why had the engines failed? When test results from the Bari fuel tanker come in, they too are conclusive. The fuel filters, hose couplings and tanker fuel at Bari airport are clean.
So fuel contamination as a source of double engine flame out was then excluded.
At this point, the investigators still don't know what caused the downing of Tuninter Flight 1153. But something has been eating at Panetta. If the plane was filled with fuel, and since the fuel is stored in the plane's wings, why did the wing section float?
Floating on the wing indicates that the weight of the wing was not so high. We have been told by ATR that if the amount of fuel that was supposed to be into the wing, around 2,000 kilograms, were on the fuel tanks, the wings maybe would not be able to float.
Panetta suspects the plane didn't have as much fuel as the pilots thought, but he doesn't know how that could be. 2 weeks into the investigation, Panetta gets an important lead in the case.
After 2 weeks of the event, we received some technical documentation from the aircraft operator.
According to the logs, Captain Garbi flew the same aircraft the day before the accident. After that flight, he reported a problem with his fuel gauge.
When he left the aircraft the day before, he reported that the right display float indicator was out of service, so it needs to be replaced.
The fuel quantity indicator, or FQI, is a gas gauge that tells pilots how much fuel is left on board. The lights on the FQI were malfunctioning, and Captain Garbi made a note of this in the maintenance log.
We were able to see that the fuel quantity indicator was changed the day before the event.
The maintenance log raises the possibility that the FQI that the mechanic installed was not the right one for the plane. It doesn't seem to have the right model number. Tuninter flies two models of ATR aircraft, the ATR-42 and the larger ATR-72.